Hello, I'm Michael Nix, and I would like to welcome you to the New American Banjo Festival. The schedule for the evening is 6 p.m., an interview with myself and Kate Spencer on the A.E. Smith Banjo Company. 7 p.m., a question and answer with Kate on the A.E. Smith Banjo Company. Now, please type your questions into the chat box in the festival window. And if you know Kate, please let her know who is asking the question. At 7:30, we'll have a concert by Shingle the Roof, Kate Spencer playing her A.E. Smith banjos, and Jerry Devokatis playing the guitar. At 8:15, the New Classic Banjo Project with myself will play a concert. Thank you for your overwhelming support for this festival, and I hope you enjoy the evening. Hi, I'm Michael Nix, and I'm here to talk with Kate Spencer, who was the co-owner of A.E. Smith Banjo Company that was located in our area here in Franklin County, Massachusetts.
That's right.
So, welcome.
Thank you.
So, why did you start a banjo company, and why did you start it here?
Well, that's a really good question. To give you a little history, which actually didn't involve why we started the Banjo Company, but what they call generically the Pioneer Valley is a very old seat of industry.
Yes.
The industry's gone now, but Springfield, Holyoke, Chicopee, all the way up the valley were machine shops and woodworking shops.
Right.
There was a tradition here from the late 1800s of violin making.
Oh, there was?
In this valley. A friend of mine, Ron Midgett, several years ago put on a display in Springfield at the museum of 30 or 40 different violin makers. And I personally own a violin that was made in the valley.
That's interesting. Were these European immigrants who came over and
Yes.
started? Were they German, Italian? Do people know what the history was?
If I saw the names, I could attribute an Italian versus a German.
But that's interesting.
Yeah, I'd have to have a list in front of me. But there were skilled craftsmen who came over to work in the industrial base in the valley. So anyway, we continued that tradition, though not consciously. A friend of mine had a shop, who was my former partner, Mark Surgies. He had a shop at Leverett Arts and Crafts, and he was making dulcimers.
Oh,
he played banjo, I played banjo, and we were friends, and we went out to dinner one night, and it was just like the cartoon. This little light bulb went off over my head. I says, you've got a shop, let's start a banjo company. This was 1973 in October, and the folk revival was going strong.
Yes, it was.
A lot of people who were starting to play banjo, and even though it continues to happen, the supply of old instruments made by your classic companies of the Boston and Philadelphia banjo makers from the end of the last century up until the 1920s, 1930s, those banjos were being grabbed up, and people needed banjos. So we decided to make banjos, and we made a line of banjos that was not a copy of any of these.
Oh, okay.
Mark is a superb designer, and so we took kind of parts of Vega, parts of Stewart, parts of Orpheum. Our tone system, which I'll talk about later, was from the Bacon Banjo Company.
Oh, sure. Yep.
And we designed a traditional banjo that was ours, but would could have been made in 1950.
In the period, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So that's how we started. And we started with probably a loan from my father, though part of it might have been from Mark's father. We started with a table saw and $600.
It's a good place to start.
Yes.
And an idea.
Yes. So we felt that we were fulfilling a need, and it was something that we wanted to do. We loved the music, and it was just a natural thing for both of us to do.
Great.
So.
Good. So the shop at Leverett Arts and Crafts grew too small for you as you grew. How did the move from place to place happen?
Yes, we ended up needing more room. The first thing that happened was we were facing LCA, the first floor studio, which is now occupied by a painter, Louise Minks.
Oh, I know her. Sure.
Yeah. So she's there now, but that's where we started. And then later we took on a second space upstairs in the balcony over the gallery.
Okay.
And that wasn't great for LCA because, all our sawdust would filter down.
Right.
Anyway, so then we found in so that was 73. We started production in January of 74. And then we moved to the corner of Hope and Olive Street, where that wonderful industrial building sits on the corner.
Right.
And fortunately, there was an elevator.
Oh,
because
okay.
by then we had not only the table saw, we had a great huge blue bandsaw named Tinkerbell. We had a drill press. We had routers, all kinds of machinery. So
right.
we were either on the third or the fourth floor of the corner of Hope and Olive Street. Big, huge, old industrial space, all the space we needed, and wooden floors. Fortunately, they paid for the heat,
right.
floor-to-ceiling windows,
right.
Wonderful light,
yep.
And it was perfect.
Yeah.
And then after I left the Banjo Company in 1979, Mark decided that he wanted to own his own space. He bought a space in Shelburne Falls, right on the river. But that's a whole other story.
Right, sure.
So he was there for a while,
yeah.
and then
and then it folded.
And then it folded.
Right.
Basically, the early '80s was the time of a kind of a recession. But the other thing that happened was that he chose a building that needed to have the sills replaced.
Oh dear.
It needed to be built from the bottom up.
Right.
And you can't make banjos while you're replacing sills.
Yeah,
So anyway, there was a gap.
Yeah. Good. So tell me a little bit more about the materials and the kinds of influences that that you used. So you looked at different banjo makers and decided, oh, this tone system works for me, or the neck, or what sort of things were you thinking about while you were analyzing these historical banjos and trying to develop your own?
Well, we went to two different people. I don't know who in the audience will have known or remember them, but one was Pete Colby and one was Sandy Sheehan. Now, Pete Colby was a machinist, a banjo player who was the driving force behind many New Hampshire contradance orchestras.
Oh, okay.
And he not only built unique instruments, but he machined his own metal parts because he was a machinist.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of advice from him, and then Sandy happened to own a Bacon Double F Professional.
Okay.
And he loaned us that Professional, and that's where we took it apart, checked out the tone system, and so we modeled our things after Sandy's Bacon. And Sandy, by the way, he's gone now, but he for many years owned Sandy's Music in Central Square.
Oh, okay.
In Cambridge.
Yep. Yeah. Great. I
Wonderful
remember that. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
So those were our personal influences.
Were you looking for a particular sound? Were you looking for structure, aesthetics? How did you come to think about the choices you made?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, we knew that we wanted an old-time looking banjo. Mm-hmm. So that was the basis of what we were doing.
Yes.
Rather than a reproduction.
Right.
Though I will interject here, we did many reproduction necks for people on commission. Okay. So we carved modern Vega necks, and Mark was an expert engraver and inlayer, and so we had chicken hawks and. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we did lots and lots of reproductions, but our line of banjos was our design. Yeah, original. And as we changed, to tell people, the tone system is, well, I can show right here. This is the rim,
Right.
and this is what's called an internal resonator, as opposed to a full resonator, which you would have on a bluegrass banjo.
Right.
You
That's-
can't see the tone system so well here, but this is the same banjo without the internal resonator.
Right.
And if you can come up and get a close shot of this right here, the tone system is this metal piece right in here. There are two pieces inside that, a square piece and a round piece. And then the metal piece comes up, folds, and then ends up right here. And these were made by a wonderful guy at UMass, a machinist at UMass, named Judd Stone.
No.
And he made these systems for us. And so we'd put one on a banjo, we'd see how it sounded. He says, well, let's try it with a little bit heavier metal.
Yeah.
Oh, let's try it with a little bit wider flange.
Right.
So it was a process.
Yep.
It was an experimentation.
Interesting. Yeah, this is interesting because I went through a similar process while developing my 7-string and trying to design something for a sound that I heard in my head to try to make the banjo match what I heard in my head. So
Okay.
it's really interesting to hear you speak about how you were tweaking the tone system to get what you thought you wanted to hear.
But this is what's really important right now, is to do something special that's going to last beyond me.
Right.
Because, as you know, Michael, you don't own your musical instruments. I don't own my musical instruments. These are gifts that we've purchased or been given, and we are the caretakers until they pass on to the next person.
Yes, yep. And that's right. And they're the conduit through which our musical gifts and ideas
Exactly.
travel out into the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. So tell me about the woods. How did you find woods? How did you choose woods? Did you have a certain supplier? Did you go out and seek certain woods from places?
All of the above.
Okay.
So the woods in the banjos were, I'd say, mostly maple, some cherry, some walnut, some mahogany, and we made at least one out of holly, and I will go back to that story in a minute.
Okay.
So we tried to get as much local wood as we could. Maple we would buy from local lumber suppliers.
Okay.
Cherry as well, though cherry was harder to find. The one special cherry story is that one day I was hiking up on a hill in Coleraine, and I saw a cherry tree that was about 15 feet in diameter, went straight up for 40 feet without a branch, which is extremely unusual for American black cherry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somehow or another, I convinced the landowner to sell us that tree.
Interesting. Yep.
So we cut it down and sawed it up, sent it to the local dry kiln, and so most of our cherry banjos
Were
came
from
from
that
wood,
tree.
from
Yeah.
Coleraine.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's a great story. Yeah.
And then for hardwoods, we had to buy ebony, early on Brazilian rosewood, later on Indian rosewood. And when I was looking at my notes to prepare for this, I had forgotten. We used to go down to the docks, the shipping yards in New York City, where they would bring tropical hardwood in.
Oh, okay.
And it was sold by the board foot. And these days, this is unbelievable. So this would have been, mid-70s.
Right.
Into
Yeah.
the late 70s.
Yeah.
$3 a foot, board foot, for Brazilian rosewood.
Yeah.
And we would buy a chunk of wood that was 3 inches thick, maybe 10 inches wide, and 8 feet long. You just don't see that
No,
anymore.
you don't.
I mean,
And-
in the first place, there's a whole thing about sites and wood and not being exported anymore. Brazil isn't even exporting it anymore.
Right. Right.
But we used to go down to the docks and get our hardwood. And then we would saw it up on Tinkerbell. We'd do resawing, Mark did all the resawing on Tinkerbell.
On Tinkerbell.
Yep. And then we would sticker all the wood and wait till it dried and
Yeah.
then use it.
Interesting. Yeah. So you really did source it out yourself and do all of that yourself. Yeah.
So one time we needed to make a holly neck for And we did a lot of this. You take a tenor banjo, and the tenors aren't quite as popular, at least around here, as the 5 strings. And we'd make a 5-string neck to go on the tenor rim.
Okay, yep.
Sometimes you could use parts of the tenor neck, the inlays or something like that. But anyway, this was an Orpheum, and it was a number 3, and I needed a piece of holly for it. And holly is kind of a garbage wood. It doesn't grow very big, beautiful berries and leaves. But I mean, this is the holly that you see in Christmas wreaths.
Right, and the songs are written about holly and the berry.
And the wood is visually without grain. So it's perfect. Is
it very dense?
It's incredibly dense.
Yeah, okay.
And it doesn't have any grain in it like maple does.
Yeah.
And it's very, very white. Really white. Much whiter than maple. So I went down to the local wood store, which was called Amherst Woodworking. And in that time, they were still in Amherst. And of course, I took my 2 Springer Spaniels with me. And the guy behind the counter gets attacked by my Springer Spaniels.
Oh, no.
And so I said, I need a piece of holly. And he said, okay. And then after that, he asked a friend of mine who plays banjo and does woodworking, who's Bear Acker. Do you know Bear?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So anyway, he asks Bear Acker, well, who was that girl with those 2 dogs? And Bear said, oh, that was Katie. And he said, no, but he's the only one in the world who's ever called me Katie. That's Katie. He said, okay. So Bear calls me up and says, Jeff Branch really wants to take you out. I said, well, why would he want to take me out? I met him once at the woodworking shop. He said, really, really, if he calls you up, will you go out with him? I said, well, I'll go out with anybody once. So then he calls Jeff and says, you need to call Katie. She really, really wants to go out with you. She's dying to go out with you. He says, I don't know this woman. Why would I ask her out? Barry says, just believe me. Just please, just call her up. So he called me up and asked me out. And that was 1978. And we got married in 83 and
there you go.
Had our daughter in 85.
Wonderful. And a nice piece of holly out of the deal.
And a nice piece of holly out of it. Yes. It turned into a great banjo.
Yeah. Good. So
more stuff about supplies.
Okay.
We did not make any of the metal parts, unlike Pete Colby. We bought banjo parts from Stuart McDonald.
Okay, yeah.
And, big gross discounts. Found a machine shop or a machine parts shop somewhere out of Boston. I could never tell you where it is right now. But they made the hex. Okay, this right here is a round screw, okay?
Yep.
Traditionally, and a lot of the banjos, when we could get them, had a hex screw here.
Oh, yeah, I remember, sure. I've got a number of them that have that. Yeah.
So we would go down and try to buy those hex screws. So this is the bracket, this is the shoe, and this is the nut. These are all 3 separate parts, and then this is the 4th part in here. And so everything we bought from Stuart McDonald, and the brace right here we bought from Stuart McDonald.
Yeah.
Then we bought tail pieces and the end pin from Stuart McDonald. But as I say, when we could, we would find the hex nuts right there.
Right.
I don't know where this came from. I think this is custom. I don't remember putting this on, but we may have.
Yeah.
And then this pattern right here, and the rosewood here. So this is Indian rosewood. This is called marquetry.
Yes.
And it comes in very long, thin strips. So you can see that the pattern on here is different from the pattern on here.
Right. Yep, that's right. Oh, you've got nice little crosses on there.
Yeah, and see then on the inside,
as
we've
well.
got the same thing there.
Right. Yep, the same thing happens on guitars with that.
Yes.
The marquetry.
Yep. And then this part right here is called the rim cap. So the rim is made of 5 or 6 different pieces of maple, sugar maple. This is all the maple I talk about is New England sugar maple.
Okay.
It's not soft red maple or silver maple or East Coast maple. I mean West Coast maple. So after we slice the pieces up, and they're about 1/8 of an inch thick by 3 inches by 4 feet long, and so then you would have to boil those pieces
To soften the wood.
to soften the
So you
wood,
could bend
and
it.
then you would bend them around a form
Okay.
and put glue in between each. So there's 4 or 5 different layers of maple in here.
It's all bent and glued
It's all
together.
it's
Yeah.
all bent,
Yep.
and then it would be on a flat table built around a form, and then there were throw clamps all the way around where you would clamp braces to put it all together.
Right.
And then a week or so after that dried, you would take it off, and then you'd have to put it on the lathe. That's another thing I didn't. We had a huge
okay.
huge lathe. So anyway, you turn it on the lathe, and then this would just be showing the side grain.
All the layers.
Yeah, all the
you could
layers. So
see,
that's
right.
why this got capped.
Yeah.
And this is another piece. This is 4 pieces.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. 4 little arcs of
And then
maple.
this is the actual maple of the rim.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's the outside piece. And somewhere probably, yeah, I don't see where probably the seam is under here,
Okay.
because that's where we would put it.
Great. So tell me about the carving. Who did the carving?
I don't know. Mark and I both carved.
Okay.
So that was one of the few things that we both did.
Okay.
And our carving looked exactly the same.
Yep.
However, Mark did all the cutting of the inlay
Oh, the cutting of the
and
inlay.
the
Yeah.
engraving. I put a lot of inlay in.
Yep.
You do it with a Dremel and some filler. But he did the cutting, and then he did all the engraving. So
Lovely.
yeah.
So now this is a presentation style banjo, so there's a lot of
Yeah.
fancy inlay. Did you design, or did Mark design his own patterns, or did you
Oh,
take these from?
Mark was a fabulous designer, even to the point, and I shouldn't say this, but to the point where it became a problem, because once he had designed a pattern, he wanted to go on to the next pattern. And it would be even more beautiful than the
Right.
one he had just done.
Yeah.
However, we had just taken photographs for the catalog for this pattern, and then the pattern changes.
Right.
So that was a bit of a problem in terms of production, but
Production,
not
marketing,
a
right.
major problem
Right.
at all.
Yeah.
So yes, Mark did all the designing.
It's
And-
absolutely beautiful.
And
Yep.
you know what this is right here?
What is that?
This
The
is
pattern.
a maple seed.
Oh, okay. I see it now.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
key, the maple key.
Yeah, this is and these are the spinners. This is what comes
Right.
off the sugar maple.
My daughter
tree.
calls them helicopters, right?
You're exactly right.
Yep.
On the bacon banjo, which this is copied after, it's like a violin
A little,
F-hole.
yes, right. Yep. I'm
But
familiar
we
with those.
decided to customize it, of course, and so all the internal resonator banjos have these
Little
maple leaves.
keys, yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And Mark cut those out too. So you see there's 2 holes drilled here,
Yeah.
and then I think these are cut by hand.
Yep, I'll bet they are.
So
Bet they are. Lovely.
and part of what we would use for nuts, you see this nut pattern right here is different from this nut pattern here. And it was often just a matter of what we could get
Okay, yeah.
and what Stuart McDonald had produced at the time. Oh, the other thing that Mark was really expert at was making jigs. You know what a jig is? Besides being a triple time.
A triple time.
No.
A 6/8 dance.
Yeah, right. Yeah. A jig is something that allows you to do something on a machine.
Oh, okay, yep.
So for example, when we first started out, these fret slots were all cut by hand. And that was not good because you can't cut a straight fret slot by hand. You end up flaring out either end. So on some of the older banjos, those frets are coming up.
Right.
Because they're not being held in properly.
Yeah.
So Mark designed a machine that had, these are 22 frets, that had 22 blades on it, on a circular rod.
On a rod, right.
And the blades were spaced where the fret should be.
Right.
And then it was mounted on some kind of a turner. And then when you wanted to cut your fret slots, you turned it on and just ran your ebony underneath it and back.
Quick and efficient, yeah.
Yes, which is what you have to do.
Yeah.
We didn't have enough money to really invest in a lot of things like that, such as a CNC carver, which were just coming in, which would carve the neck for you. So the necks were rough carved by a shaper, and then they were hand carved. In other words, part of the failure of this banjo company was that there was too much handwork, and we couldn't charge enough money for the handwork to earn a living.
Right.
And we didn't have enough money to invest in the incredible amounts of, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of machines for the machines to do the work.
Right. And that was part of your aesthetic, if I remember reading, is that you were trying to keep the prices reasonable for musicians to be able to invest in an
We
instrument.
tried, yes.
Yeah. And that's tough to do with a handmade instrument.
Yeah.
So, well, tell me a little bit about your marketing strategy. How did you get these things out in the world and let people know that these wonderful banjos were available?
That's a good question. I was in charge of the marketing, the business end of things, the advertising, the setups. Mark did the lacquer spraying, he did the inlay, he did the designing. He did a lot of the other work, but I ran the business end of it. So we advertised in instrument magazines.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Frets?
Oh, Frets, sure.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember Frets.
So Frets. We went to shops. Tony's fretted instrument in Amherst.
Yep.
Tony bought the very first banjo that we made.
Good for him.
And continued to support us for all those years, and ordered beautiful banjos and sold beautiful banjos from us.
Yeah.
And then we expanded, and so.
Now, this is all before the internet and all the kinds of internet marketing we do these days.
What's internet?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, here's some of the shops we sold to. Sandy's Music in Boston, the Music Emporium in Lexington.
Yep.
And they were in Cambridge at the time.
Okay.
Ramblin' Conrads with Bob Zentz in Norfolk.
Sure.
Ed Taylor, who was known as Uncle Banjo in Plaistow, New Hampshire.
Okay, yep.
Matty Umanoff, of course, on Bleecker Street in New York City. Griffin Instrument in Palo Alto. Briggs & Briggs in Chicago. Elderly Instruments, Stan Morbin in Ann Arbor, I think.
Yeah.
Folklore Center in Chicago. Fifth String in San Francisco. McCabe's in Los Angeles. There's probably another 10 of lesser known dealers that purchased our instruments over the years. And some of them, probably at the beginning, I sold because I would call them up and say, can I send you a catalog? And we're making these great banjos. And I took 2 cross-country road trips. So ended up selling in Denver, and then going out to the West Coast, and going up the West Coast to Seattle, and then back through the Chicago area.
Right.
So that's how I picked up several of these Central and West Coast dealers.
Mm-hmm. Great.
The other thing we did, we went to folk festivals. Fox Hollow.
Oh, right,
And
okay.
we sold banjos there. We went to, what's the name of the festival that used to happen up on Lake Champlain?
Oh,
I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
Anyway, so I went up there.
Yeah.
Any kind of summer festival where they had a crafts area, and we knew there were going to be musicians there. We would go and tent and spend the weekend there.
Show your wares and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah, great,
Right.
good.
And then I published right from the beginning catalogs, and after that, the catalogs continued, and then I published, which I have copies of in this album here, I published newsletters.
Oh, okay, so people would subscribe to your,
No, they didn't subscribe. The newsletter went to any dealer that we had and anybody that had ever bought our banjos.
oh, okay.
Or anybody whose address we had.
Mhm.
So, for example, if I go into
So
here.
there was a lot of word of mouth spreading the news by
I guess.
dealers and people who own the instruments.
Yeah. So here are some of the newsletters. I'll show you that one. September 20th, 1976. Dear friends, we at the Arthur Smith Banjo Company are happy to offer an intensive banjo building course for January of 77. Dates will be January 3rd to the 28th. All tools and materials provided. We would be glad to sell chisels to you if requested at the time of reservation, but a chisel is like a toothbrush. You don't share it with your neighbor. As for prerequisites, we recommend that you have some minimal woodworking experience, else making a banjo might be a frustrating experience. We need 2 people to offer the course with a maximum of 4. Cost will be $400, $50 deposit. Students must register by December 15th. Each student will design and make his or her own banjo with a tone system like the one in Northampton, like a Vega Little Wonder. The banjo will, of course, belong to the builder when it is finished. Please feel free to write and ask more questions.
Great, wonderful.
So that's one of the things we offered in the shop was
Some
the
banjo
course,
making.
the banjo making course. And so anytime something new came up, it was an excuse to do a newsletter.
Well, so tell us then about, you mentioned the Northampton line and the other line. What were the different lines of banjos that you offered?
Well, at first, our first banjo was the Northampton, which looked like this banjo, except that it was plainer. It did have the pearl maple leaf, but it did not have binding, and it didn't have anything, it didn't have a fancy tone system, and it didn't have a lot of fancy marquetry.
Was it just a brass tone ring?
It was a, 3/8 inch brass tone ring.
Brass tone ring,
Like,
okay.
like in a Little Wonder.
Yep.
Then this is called the maple leaf, and that's the next one up because it's got this fancy tone system. It's got the bacon tone system in it.
Right.
And
Okay.
then the next one in the line is the professional, and the professional means by our definition that it had the internal resonator.
Okay.
And the fanciness varied from being as plain as that banjo. A professional always would have binding.
Okay.
But how many layers of wood? In other words, if you close up on this wood right here, this neck is what's called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a 7-piece neck. So your 2 outer pieces of maple are from the same piece of wood, but you cut it down the middle and you flip it, and then you book match it. So you match the grain across, but you flip it so that the stress of the strings pulling on the wood is counteracted by the fact that the wood is book matched. It's like this.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the red here is a piece of dyed maple. Then there's a white piece of undyed maple. Then there's a piece of rosewood. Then there's another white maple. Then there's another dyed maple. And then under the fingerboard, you've got the same thing. So you've got one stripe of rosewood veneer, a stripe of plain maple veneer, and a stripe of red maple veneer. So, anyway, makes it beautiful.
Yeah. It's
And
very
that was
beautiful.
traditionally used in some other, I can't remember if the old banjo companies used colors or not. We used red or green.
Okay.
We didn't.
Yeah.
We never put red and green together.
Right.
But we'd either use red or
Red
green,
or
or
green,
or
yeah.
just the white and the black.
Yeah.
So This
Yeah,
is,
I can't remember about the older banjos. You know, I have an old white lady and
it's not, it doesn't have any color in it.
No.
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 And we call it our own maple veneer.
Mm-hmm.
You just find some kind of coloring. I don't remember what we used.
Some
Probably
dye.
some sort of
Yeah.
aniline dye
Yeah.
and boiled it in a vat to color it.
Mm.
Because you had to have the heat to put the color into the wood.
Oh, right, to get it to absorb into the grain so it wouldn't
Yes.
fade.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Did you find that the reds faded or any of those colors faded after a while or no?
I wouldn't know.
You don't know, huh? Interesting. So,
Well, the one thing that happens is that when this was first produced, this was very white. And over the years, ultraviolet light turns it this golden.
oh, go. it's been
So if
golden,
I
yeah.
were to take this banjo apart and show you the inside of this neck right here,
It'd be white.
it would be white.
Mm.
If I were to take the rim apart and show you the inside of this rim,
Mhm.
it would be white.
Mm.
So,
That's
And
a
because
pleasing
it's-
color that it has become.
because it's lacquer,
Yeah.
and because it's old at this point, well, you can especially see it, look at the checking. Do you know what checking is? You need to hold the banjo. The lacquer is all crazed,
Yep, okay,
and that's what lacquer does.
yep, that's
If I
right.
put polyurethane on this,
Right.
it would
It would be smooth, yeah.
it would be smooth,
Yep.
but we would never stoop so low as to use polyurethane on a banjo.
Yeah. No, I have handmade guitars that do that as well,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
so. So how many employees did you have?
Well, it started with Mark and me, and then we had a wonderful friend join us named Bruce Butler, and he was very handy and did woodworking with us. I've got pictures of him in the album here, and he was also a photographer. He's still a photographer. He lives in Hawaii now, and he took all our pictures.
Oh, nice, great.
So the pictures that you're going to be showing that you scanned from the website
Were all taken by him.
Were all taken by Bruce.
That's great.
Yep, and then Nancy Hazard worked with us for a while.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Huh, a woman of many talents.
Yes.
She is, huh?
Kathy Torrey worked for us for a while. I don't know if you know Kathy.
No, I don't know her.
Singer from New Hampshire.
Okay.
Dave Doucette worked for us for a long time, and he had a famous brother, I can't remember, another Doucette, and then Dave went off to become a repair person and is still a repair person of quite note. I don't know where he lives right now.
Right, yep.
But the other thing we did, you probably never heard of a program called CETA.
CETA. Yes, yeah, I knew that. I knew about-
CETA.
Yeah, it was a work,
Yeah.
a
it was
gov- government
training
work
program.
training program, sure.
So we got a lot of money from the government. I'm not going to say a lot of money, but in those days, any money was a lot of money.
To help train people.
Yeah. So CETA would pay employees' wages for a couple of years,
Hmm.
and
It's a nice way to help a small business.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, they helped us. They helped
Yeah.
us a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure we never had more than 4 employees at a time.
Okay,
More likely 2 or 3 at a time, besides me and Mark.
right. And did they have specific duties, or did they?
Yes,
Okay.
they would have specific duties.
Okay.
Sanding would be a big thing
Mm-hmm,
that somebody without a lot of woodworking experience could do.
yeah. And then would they put the metal hardware on, or is that something that you and Mark did? How did you approach the assembly?
I'm sure we paid people to put them together at the end.
Okay,
Once the hardware was on, and then I had to adjust what's called the action, which is how far the strings are from the fretboard.
right.
I took care of all that, the stringing up and the bridge and the nut, carving the nut so that it was the right height. But no, that would be an
The
easy thing to
bolting
have
of
somebody
the
do.
hardware and
Yeah.
the metal stuff on, yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
So what else? Any other interesting little stories about the banjo or the company, or
Tons of stories.
what occurs to you? What would you like people to know about that?
Well, let me show you some of the pictures of this album.
Okay.
And I don't know if how you want to do this, but Well, this first one is American Gothic, as you can see.
Yep.
Let's see. We tried to make things in batches, so we didn't make one banjo at a time, except for the custom orders. So, I mean, you can see the Shelburne rims all lined
Yep.
up?
So it's Shelburne Rim Day. Right?
Well, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4
Four right
Shelburnes.
there, yeah.
Then you've got some Northamptons, and probably the fancier ones with marquetry would become maple leaves.
Yep.
So, here's Mark, not a great photo, but here's Mark putting on a rim cap.
Okay. Yep.
We used lots of glue and lots of masking tape.
Mm.
Here's me carving the neck to fit to the rim. Here I'm doing some fretwork. There's the Arthur Smith Bridge. This is a picture of us at Fox Hollow
Okay. Yep.
with all the
Your banjo's hanging up.
Yep, with a tent set up. There's
And
one.
actually, while we're on the subject of the bridge there, you want to hold that postcard up and just tell people about the name and where the name
Oh,
came
sure.
from? Because that's an interesting story.
So, this is the Arthur Smith Bridge in Coleraine, Massachusetts. And we first decided to call our banjo company the S&M Banjo Company because we had 2 S's and 1 M. The M dropped out. Debbie Merwin dropped out. So there were 2 S's. And then I got the checks and it said S&M Banjo Company. I went, oh no, we've made a huge mistake here.
Right.
So Mark drove by the Arthur Smith Bridge and said, well, what about this? And I said, well, let's change the A to E for everlasting. And, okay, so here is an unassembled tone system.
Oh, there it is, all the parts.
So
Yep.
this is the part that Judd Stone spun.
Yep.
And then he spun it and it was in brass. And we had to take it and have it nickel plated.
Okay.
And then these 2 are brass. This is a 3/8 inch round, and then this is a 1/4 by 1/2 inch. No, it's not as much as a 1/2 inch. 3/8 by 1/4 rectangular piece.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And then right here it shows you how it goes together. So here's the rim with all the grooves cut out on the lathe
Yep.
for 1, 2, 3 parts to fit into it. So then once this top part is on it, then you put the head on top of that, then you put the bracket hoop on top of that, and at some point you drill holes all around the side.
Yep.
And
The brackets and shoes. And
so anyway, I wanted to
That's
show you that.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to see how it expands
Right.
all the
right.
pieces. Yeah.
Collection of business cards from all our dealers and friends.
Wonderful. Huh? Yeah.
Yep. I have a wonderful story to tell you here.
Tell me.
Bill Schmidt and Sarah Gregory were husband and wife, and they were both musicians, and she had a contra dance band and called dances Massachusetts and New Hampshire.
Okay.
She went blind fairly early on from juvenile diabetes. And then she was calling a square dance, and her musicians were not sure if she could handle calling a dance without being able to see the dancers. So at one point she got really mad and said, well, I'll just have to get myself another band. So she'd be calling directions, and she could hear that set number 3 back in that corner was having problems.
Right.
And would walk them through that. But here's a story from Bill, who was called Smitty, and Sarah. And unfortunately, Bill died about a year ago, and Sarah had a massive heart attack or a stroke some years before that. So they're both gone. Very sad.'Cause they're our age. But anyway, here's what Bill wrote to me. My white lady was stolen in the fall of 1975, and I got $800 from the insurance company. After searching the music stores and not finding anything I liked, I decided to design a banjo that in the future would be regarded like the old banjos. I went to see the folks at A.E. Smith and described my dream banjo and sent $100 a month for the next 8 months. Kate or Mark called me and said I'd better come to Indian Neck because they had something they wanted to show me. And Indian Neck is a folk festival. It's been my pride and joy ever since. And then here's the story about the banjo. Sarah and I were sailing from Maine to New Hampshire, and our sailboat struck a reef off Boone Island around 9 p.m. She started sinking very quickly. Sarah suited up in wet weather gear and got into the dinghy that was tethered to the boat. She was terrified of being separated from me, being blind. The water on deck was now ankle deep. I crawled into the bow to get my banjo, and as I handed it over to the side to Sarah, she was very encouraged, thanking me, well, if he's bringing the banjo, we're going to survive. The water was now up to my calves. I got suited up and grabbed a compass and some flares and a couple of cans of soda, which we later learned were beer. We were 5 to 6 miles offshore. We could see the lights, but a storm was coming up and rowing becoming increasingly difficult. We rowed for 12 hours, singing songs back and forth just to keep us going. By the time we got near shore, the waves and the wind were so high that rowing just kept us in place. We'd seen a couple of boats, but not many because of the storm. Even with the flares, they didn't see us. We saw a boat somewhat closer, and Sarah stood up and waved her red raincoat at them. But the boat passed us by, and Sarah slipped down. Then they turned and came back. At first they thought we were some crazy kayakers out in the storm, but Sarah's frantic waving, they had second thoughts and turned around, pulled us on board, and took us into Portsmouth. I asked them if they ever found the boat. They put on a concert with Andy Wolf and raised $5,000, which they used to search. Going down to 120 feet, they didn't find her, and it was speculated that she had sunk in a very deep place, never to rise again.
Anything else you want to tell us? You want to tell us about how the company sort of ended, or why you ended your relationship with the company and then changed directions?
There wasn't any money in making banjos. And I was tired of going week after week with not even taking any salary. First you had to pay your rent and electricity, and you had to pay your employees.
Right.
And then you had to pay for your parts because you couldn't make banjos without parts.
Right.
So on July 4th, Independence Day, I had my last day at work in '79. Then I went off to violin school on Long Island at SUNY and learned how to set up violins.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I opened up Maple Leaf Music in Brattleboro.
Yeah. And that's where I met you.
Okay. And then Mark moved to Shelburne Falls, and I talked about that a little bit about that earlier. And the last records I have are October of 1980. I don't know how much longer the company lasted after that, but I just don't know.
All right. And so, do you still hear from people about A. Smith banjos?
I do.
Tell us a little bit about.
Right here on my price list, I have an Arthur Smith warranty card, and the back, and a little place to put a stamp, and it says, this Arthur Smith banjo was painstakingly handcrafted from the finest available materials. Every step of its manufacture has been carefully executed by skilled, professional craftspeople who work within the great traditions of the turn-of-the-century banjo builders. The Arthur Smith Banjo Company guarantees this instrument against all defects in materials and workmanship to the original owner. The warranty does not cover strings, bridge, or drumhead. If the instrument is abused or improperly repaired or adjusted by an unauthorized repairman, the warranty will be void. Should this banjo at any time require adjustment or repair, please contact us. So, as many warranty cards as came back, I kept. And the Banjo Company's records were maintained on 3x5 note cards,
Oh,
and the model number, and the materials, and the serial number would be recorded on this 3x5 card. And I have a nice old wooden file box for 3x5 cards.
right.
Then when the warranty card would come in, I would staple that to the production card.
Mm.
And maybe half of the banjos, maybe a third of them, I got warranty cards back on.
Right.
Then I put up a website, which is aesmithbanjo.com, if you want to look it up. In the website, it said, please contact me if you have a banjo. So people over the years have gotten in touch with me, and anytime somebody says, I have your banjo number such and such, I'm the original owner, I will mark that on the card. In other words, I update the cards when I hear from
When
the
you
owners.
hear people, yeah.
If
yeah.
it's a new owner, it could have gone through 4 or 5 people, I never know, but I write down who has the banjo and where it is,
Right.
and that's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun to keep track of these, your little babies out in the world there.
Right.
Yeah.
This banjo has a wonderful story to it. It went to somebody on the West Coast. I don't know, I'd have to look through my records and see if it went to a shop or an individual. I got a phone call from somebody who had found me through the website, and they said, I am, I don't know what the term is, somebody who goes in and buys estates.
Mm. Right.
It might have been an auctioneer, it might have been somebody that's selling to an auctioneer.
Yes.
And I've got this, what I think is an Arthur Smith banjo. Are you interested in it? And how much is it worth? Oh, I don't know what to do with it.
Right.
And the person sent me photographs, and I said, I would love to have that banjo. So we agreed to a price, but of course they had no way to ship it. So I had to UPS a banjo box to the West Coast, so they had a box to put this
to put
banjo
it
in,
in,
to
send it to you.
to send it back.
Yeah.
To send it back.
Yeah.
So I got this banjo. It's got one little tiny chip on the peg head, but I put new strings on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I put new strings on this one. And I don't think that the strings had ever been changed since it went out in 1979.
No kidding.
No.
Yeah. Huh.
I don't think it had ever been played.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's fascinating. Fascinating
I'm
story.
just very happy.
Yeah, I
with
did a
that.
quick search on the internet to see if I could find any for sale, and nothing came up. I saw something, I can't remember what company, probably 2 or 3 years ago. There was one of these professionals with the half resonator in the back.
Yeah.
But that had been long sold. So
They don't come up very often. We made about 600 banjos.
mm,
I'll never know the exact number because after I left, there weren't a lot of records kept.
right,
Mark was very busy working on the new building, and
and he just shipped them out. Yeah.
he made them and sold them. But I don't have the records of who a lot of them went to.
Yeah. Great. Well, anything else you want us to know about A. Smith Banjos, a company?
Well, let me see if there's anything on my list here. Oh, this is kind of fun. So this was, and I'm putting this on for the benefit of the younger generation. This was my #2 catalog. This was my #1 catalog, and I know that this is #2 because it says #2 on it. So you can see that you can see the design
Yes.
on the cover. Somewhere I found this design. I don't know what it was for, but I cut out this part, and I cut out this part, and I cut out this part. And there was a little company in the old days, like when people lived in caves, called Chart Pack.
Mm.
Do you know Chart Pack?
No.
No, you haven't done any layout.
No.
So anyway, there were numbers and letters that were mounted on a clear surface, and when you put them on here and rub them, they came off.
Oh, okay. And that's how you did the letter transfer.
So that's how I did the letter transfer.
Mm.
So this is all Chart Pack. I
No,
couldn't
no
remember.
Photoshop.
I couldn't remember it. I asked Jeff, I says, what's that letter company? He says, Chart Pack. I said, boy, you're right. That's absolutely right.
Well, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining me and talking about
It's
your
fun.
your fascinating Banjo Company.
Do you have any more questions?
Not right off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I'm sure some will pop up for our question and answer period.
Right.
So
right.
I'll go back, and now that I've chatted with you, I'll go back and read a little bit more and see what other kinds of questions come up. I guess I had one other question that I could put in. Did you get any woods from Michael Gurian? Did you work with Michael Gurian?
I worked for Gurian.
You worked for Gurian,
Yeah.
and I remember he supplied tone woods for a while, maybe after his factory in Hinsdale burned down. I don't.
I can't remember, but I did find out from Michael about going to New York to buy the ebony and the Brazilian rosewood off the docks.
Mm.
We must have bought some wood from him. I can't imagine that we didn't. That's where I ended up getting my instrument making skills.
Oh, from Michael's
from,
shops.
From working with Michael.
Yeah.
Yep. So after this section right here, there's going to be, you want to tell them about the call-in Zoom section where they can ask me questions?
Sure. So we're going to have a little question and answer session as this ends. And what we'd like you to do is type your questions into the chat window in the stream, and we'll pick them up, and I'll ask Kate your question, and please let us know where you're from, or if you know Kate, who you are, so we know who you're talking to. And
or if you have an Arthur Smith banjo.
That would be nice to know.
I'd
Kate,
love to know. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
They're like my children. I've got 600 children out in the world.
There you go. So thank you, Kate.
You're welcome, Michael.
Quite fascinating.
I guess we're supposed to do this.
Here we go.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Michael Nix, and I'm here with Kate Spencer, and we'd like to hear any questions or comments that you might have after watching the interview. You can type the questions into the chat box at the bottom of your screen. If you're in full screen, I think you need to get out of full screen to be able to see the chat box. And if you know Kate, please let us know who you are so Kate knows who's talking to her. So I have a couple of questions just to get things going here while we're waiting for you guys to fill out your chat boxes. So Kate, I'm just interested, did you find that many used A.E. Smith banjos came through Maple Leaf Music over the years?
Boy, not very many.
Not very many.
If we got one a year, that would be lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And they sold right away. People were looking for them. And I had a list of people who wanted to know if especially we got a Shelburne model in. So I once got a Shelburne model in from the original owner, and I knew immediately where it needed to go. There was an old-time musician that really wanted a Shelburne. It was a really nice mahogany Shelburne, which we didn't make very many of.
Mm.
So I immediately turned it over to him.
Yeah, the Shelburne is very, very handsome instrument. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm covetous. I went on the internet to see if there were any up for sale anywhere. So.
Did you find any?
Oh no, maybe 3 years ago was the last thing I saw.
Yeah.
Anyways, that. So another question. As the rise of manufacturing of old style banjos came into being, did people come and ask your advice or have conversations based on your previous work, or do you think people are just sort of finding their own way when they were getting going in this venue in this way?
Boy, that's an interesting question. I don't have the facts in front of me, but Arthur Smith stopped production basically in about 1980, maybe early 1981. And the new production banjos, old-time banjos, were started long after that.
Mm.
So the answer is no. Nobody ever came to me and asked my opinion. But what changed was we made. I previously mentioned Pete Colby. We made a banjo that could be played aggressively and loudly, and now there's more of a trend towards an old-timey banjo that has a very large rim, say a 12-inch rim, a short scale neck, and they go plunky, 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 and ours went ting, ting, ting.
Right. Yeah.
Very, very different kind of banjo is being made now for an old-timey banjo. And the type of old-timey players are young and beautiful and play wonderful banjo, but they don't want the kind of banjo that Arthur Smith made. They want more. We're doing it, for example, we're doing a Bacon copy, and they want a copy of a banjo that maybe doesn't even have a name from the 1860s, the 1850s.
Right.
So there's a lot of people making them these days. I haven't kept up. I don't know who they are, but.
Oh, they're a tremendous amount. Yeah. And you know, I've been seeing them and meeting a few at the banjo gathering here and there and then hearing about them.
Yeah.
But there's a tremendous interest. Yeah. And when I was recording your concert, I noticed how loud, especially the Shelburne is. It just, wow, really knocked me over with the brilliance of the sound.
Yeah.
What sort of banjo related activities are you involved in these days?
Not too much these days because we lost our fiddle player, Tim.
Oh, and, right. Yep.
And it's hard to have just a two-piece old-time string band. Jerry and I think we did a respectable job for the next portion that's going to follow. But if you want to hire a band, you want a band, and a band is at a minimum three people.
Right, not a duo. Yeah. So, let's see. I have some. So here's Richard Swanson saying from Oklahoma City, saying, "Does Kate play the banjo?"
I sure do. You get to hear me play the banjo in the next section of this folk festival. I play what's called old-timey clawhammer style, and I started playing when I lived at Old Joe Clark in Cambridge when I was in college from, say 1970, 69, 70, 71. And one time I went to an old-time music gathering, which was in the basement of one of the Harvard University buildings. And I take out my banjo and I start playing. And this young man comes up to me and falls on his knees and says, "I've never seen a female clawhammer banjo player before. Will you marry me?" And I said, "Well, gosh, not right now, but thank you very much." So it was unusual.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the way I started playing the banjo, I was living at Old Joe's, which was a hotbed of traditional music from the 50s through the 70s, through the 80s. I had a dream that I was playing the banjo. So I woke up one morning and I said, "I gotta play the banjo." And I had played guitar before that in high school. And I went to Sandy Sheehan and said, "I need a banjo." And he said, "Well, go up and see Armand in Central Square. He's always got old junk instruments." I says, "Okay." So I go on the trolley to Armand's and I call Sandy and I said, "Well, he's got 3 banjos." And Sandy says, "Well, how much does he want for them?" I said, "Well, $10 each." And he said, I said, $10 each. And he said, "Well, buy all 3 of them." So I bought all 3 of them, put them under my arm, go back on the MTA to Old Joe Clark's in Cambridge and fixed up the best one, fixed up the other 2, and sold 2 and kept 1, and that was the beginning of my musical instrument manufacturing career.
Mm. Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So how did you learn to play? Did you learn to play by ear? Were other folks around who were playing?
This is pretty much all by ear. I got my first lessons from Sandy, at Old Joe Clark's. And then I went for a fall to UC Berkeley, and Mac Benford was out there at the time, and I had some lessons with him, the banjo player from Highwood String Band.
Great. So here's another something from the chat. It's from someone named Eric Allwart, and he says, "Hi, number 214 Northampton lives happily in McFarland, Wisconsin. I've had it since about 1982." And he said he bought it used from Spruce Tree in Madison.
Okay. That's great. I'm very happy to hear that. If he wants to get in touch with me via my website, I will put his information on number 214 card and indicate where it's living now and who it's living with.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I was hoping that this part of the festival would generate more information for you about where your little babies are and who has them.
Right, exactly. Right. Oh, that's so nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. That's nice. Great. Let's see. So when you sold these banjos, would people come to the shop? Did you mail them out, or did they primarily go through music stores? How did this happen?
It happened in any way we could generate income. So a lot of them went to dealers. We did custom Arthur Smiths for people that asked us for them. And sometimes people would just want to come and buy one from the shop. So we would wait until we had a selection of what they wanted. In other words, they want a Northampton. So we would finish a run and we would write to the person or maybe call them up because there was no internet in those days, and say, okay, we've got 3 Northamptons. You can come up to Leverett or Greenfield and try all 3 out and see which one you like.
Great. That's interesting. Did you have another question come up? No. Okay. So let me see. We have what did you use for your heads primarily, or did you change according to the banjo or change according to requests?
Remo.
Okay.
Remo heads.
Yeah.
Maybe their standard 11-inch high crown banjo head.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was before they started making fiber skin heads. If somebody wanted a skin head, we were capable of making, putting a skin head on a banjo, but
right.
That didn't happen very often.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and then did you have like recommended string tolerances or various setups, or did they change according to the model, or did you have an idea of?
I used the same set of strings on every single banjo I ever made, which was GHS PF 150s, which was a medium set of banjo strings. So the first and the fifth were 10s. The fourth string was a 22.
Yeah.
And then a 14 for the third string, and the second string was a 12. I felt that and they made a lighter set than that, they made a heavier set than that, but I felt that good old medium set was just what the banjos needed.
Good, great. And tell me a little bit about the bridges. I don't think we talked about that. Was there a standardized bridge, or did you change the bridges over time, or what did you do in terms of developing?
We just bought them probably from Stu Mack.
Okay, so it was like a standard.
A standard bridge, and the banjo would either take a half or a 5/8, depending on how the neck fit to the rim. Great. And I would do a lot of adjusting to the banjo feet.
Yeah.
to make sure that the action was proper.
Right. So here's a question. Kate, do you have a favorite banjo of your own, and why?
Who's that from?
That's from Toby.
Okay. I play what's called a maple leaf banjo, and it was the plain banjo that was shown in the previous interview.
Right.
And that banjo we made for me when I was leaving the company. So on the dowel is stamped not only the serial number. So on the top of the dowel it always says AES and then the number.
Right.
And on the side of the dowel it says my name and my birthday, because that banjo was made on my birthday.
Oh, how sweet! That's nice.
Yeah.
And that's the one you'll be playing in the concert that's coming up.
That's true, except for the one solo number that I do. I play on the fancy Shelburne.
Yes, the very fancy Shelburne. Oh, so
Yes.
here's Eric again, having a conversation. He says he will get in touch with you through the website and give you the information on
Good.
On number
214.
on number 214.
I will say that's a very early banjo.
An early banjo.
It's an early banjo. So I would guess 74, 75, probably 75. But I have a file card with all the production cards in it. So I will look it up for him.
Right. Yeah. And you probably have a record of where it originally went to on that file card, is that correct?
I will, yes.
Yeah. So that'd be interesting for Eric to know where, somewhat of
Yes.
the provenance of that particular instrument. So
Right.
Eric also asks, were the banjos usually set for a half-inch bridge?
Yes.
Yes, they were. Yeah. Good. Anything else you can think about or tell us about that era banjo? Did the banjo change over the course of the time of manufacture, and how might they have?
The big thing that changed was the neck rod, which nobody sees. But there's an adjustable neck rod in those banjos, and it's based on a Gibson neck rod. So it's two pieces of metal that are welded together at one end, and one is a short piece and one is a long piece. The long piece is threaded with a nut.
Right.
So, and then there's a stopper on the other side of the nut. So as you screw the nut down, this steel rod bends,
Yep.
which takes any kind of warp out of the neck. And after a year or a year and a half, we discovered that the metal that we were using for the neck rod was not substantial enough to deal with all neck problems. So we increased the size of the neck rod to make it stronger, so that as the thousands of pounds of energy pull the strings up, that there was enough mass of the steel to pull it back
To
down.
have counter pressure pulling it
Right.
down. Now,
Right.
and so where was the adjustment nut? Was that in the headstock or in the body somewhere?
No. If you look at the headstock, there is no bluegrass type plate on the headstock.
That's what I noticed. So
You have to take the banjo apart, and after you take the neck out of the rim, there is an adjustable hex nut under the fingerboard, and as you tighten that, it puts pressure on the neck to go like this.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Interesting. So did people bring their banjos back to you to have this adjustment done, or,
Sometimes, yeah, but
yeah.
if they were in Michigan, they didn't,
right? Yeah.
or California.
Yeah.
So,
They'd have their.
Any repairman would know how to deal with that, especially if they got in touch with us and they say, yeah, take it apart. There's a neck rod in it. It's under the fretboard.
Yeah. So Eric's coming back and asking, what made you choose a 27-inch scale?
That goes back to Pete Colby. So he was the contradance banjo player that I mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
We wanted a loud, bright sound. These days, people have gone to a 26 or a 26 and a quarter inch scale, which is your standard bluegrass scale, and you don't get anywhere near the punch out of that, but you get a rounder, fuller sound that people want these days for the plunkety banjos.
Yeah.
Pete Colby's banjo that he played for these orchestras had a 28 and a half inch scale.
Wow, that's
which is unheard of.
yeah.
Yeah. So we chose the 27 as a compromise between the 26 and a quarter and the 28 and a half.
Yeah.
And all our banjos are 27.
Interesting. Yeah. So and just to reiterate, that helped give it a little more punch, made it a little bit louder somehow, or springier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So a brighter, sharper, more direct sound rather than a round, plunky sound.
Mm-hmm. Let me just see if there's any other questions here. So did you change the action, that is how high the strings are set off the fingerboard, according to different usages you thought people playing the banjo might have? No. You had a standard. You had a standard setup.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So can you talk a little bit about how you thought about the setup and how you came to?
Well, it's pretty simple. If the neck is straight, and actually you don't want his neck to be completely straight, you want a little tiny bit of a pull to it. But if the neck is where it should be, when the tension is on the strings, you want it high enough that it doesn't buzz on the frets, and you want it low enough that you can play it up the neck.
Right. Yeah. Good. What are some of the other technical aspects of the banjo that we didn't discuss, that you had to think about when you were putting them together, or thinking about the playability, or thinking about who might end up with these banjos?
Well, I just set them up pretty consistently.
Mm-hmm.
With the same action, the same action at the nut, so that it didn't buzz. Being a banjo player, I knew what it felt like to go up the fretboard with your fingers and not have buzzing.
Right. Yeah.
And banjos are probably the most adjustable instruments in terms of sound that you can have. You can change the sound radically by changing the head. If you go from a standard Remo head to a clear head, you'll get a different sound. If you go to a fiber skin head, you'll get a different sound. If you go to a skin head, you get a completely different sound, even on the same banjo. Mm. And as you change the wood, I wouldn't change the height of the bridge, but as you change the wood and the thickness of the bridge, you can adjust the sound of the banjo as well. And in terms of the tailpiece, as you ratchet the tailpiece down toward the head, it increases the tension on the strings.
Right.
So you can change the banjo sound there too. So that's 3 different places you can really, really change the banjo sound. And you can't, the only way you can change a guitar sound is by changing the brand or the weight of the strings.
Right.
But in a banjo, you've got all these other places to move things around.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about tensioning the head. How did you deal with tensioning the head? Did you have a measurement? Did you have no, just a gut feeling of how tight it should be?
I knew how tight it could be just by pressing it down.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay. And I would tighten it up until it was as tight as it could go without breaking, and then I always told people after this banjo settled in for a while, the head is going to soften up, and you're going to have to tighten it one more time in its life, because after the first tightening, it will soften up.
Right. Good. So, are there seasonal changes in a banjo? Like on my guitar, or my mandolin, sometimes, or some of these instruments, I have to reset the either the neck or the bridge or something because of there's the different humidity or something in the atmosphere at the change of seasons. Do you find that?
Not unless you've got a skin head on it. If you've got a skin head on it, you got to dink with attention all the time.
Right.
But a plastic head is plastic, and it doesn't move except for that first few weeks after you put it on.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I went to all skin heads. From my white lady originally had a skin head, and it wouldn't stay stable in a concert, especially if it was humid. So plastic heads are much better. So here's Eric again. Eric is asking, he says, a lot of those Waverly tailpieces have given up the ghost over the years. Do you have a favorite replacement?
Kirshner's good, if you can still get them.
So
a Kirshner is a heavier style of Waverly, and it doesn't have a cover on it. If you want a rounder, fuller sound, just use I forget what they're called. Oh, a no knot. Just use a no knot, which doesn't have any lever action on it at all. It just attaches the string right down where the rim is.
So, and most of the tailpieces you got, if I remember right, from Stuart McDonald. Is that right? And and it was whatever he had in, or what? Was there a standardized tailpiece that he carried?
Well, we like the Waverleys.
Yep. Great. Did you have occasion to have to plate any of your metal, and how did you do that?
Oh, that's an interesting question. The only thing we had to plate were the tone systems that Judd Stone made at UMass, which was the scooped bacon tone system. And we had a lot of trouble finding a plater that would do them. I think there was somebody down in Chicopee that did them for years. And the other thing you have to understand about metal, you don't want, on a banjo, or in our banjos anyway, you don't want chrome, you want nickel plating. And nickel is a yellower, warmer metal color than chrome, which is a quite steely blue color. Nickel wears off over time. You'll if you're putting your hand on the edge of the banjo to play it, you can eventually wear down to the brass that's on the tension hoop. You can an older banjo always has some kind of funk on the metal, on the nuts, and but still nickel is the most beautiful metal color. So we had to make sure that we could find somebody that would do nickel plating. And I don't even know if anybody even does that custom thing anymore, but I assume they do. But it was hard to find somebody to do it.
That's interesting. Yeah. So do you find that there was any kind of metal fatigue over years? I don't know if you have had a banjo, or I guess, you may have seen historical banjos, but is that a consideration of?
Probably not now, but certainly the tailpieces can give out. They can break at the 90 degree.
Right.
So you might have to replace the tailpiece.
Right.
I guess if you really played it a lot, the geared tuners could wear out.
But those parts are all replaceable. Easily.
Those parts are all replaceable.
Easily replaceable. Yeah.
Correct.
So did you have a favorite tuning gear system that you like to install?
Well, we use planetary pegs, which was a geared peg.
Right.
I didn't like the straight through friction pegs. They just didn't give you enough accuracy in tuning.
Right. Yeah, they're hard. They slip and.
So
yeah.
we use planets.
Mm-hmm.
I know that on a lot of the Northamptons we would use a non-geared fifth tuner, and that could prove
Yeah.
problematic. But for example, I mean, I'm going to make up the figures, but we would pay $1.50 for the non-gear, and we would pay $15 for a geared peg. So there was a significantly greater investment in a geared fifth.
Right. So
geared pegs.
Yeah, we have about a minute left, and I guess I wanted to thank Eric for filling out our questions here and having a nice conversation with us. So I'm sure.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll have you and Kate will have fun talking about your banjo.
Okay.
So great, Kate. It's really been wonderful speaking with you and learning about your company and learning about your music over the past few weeks while we were putting this festival together. It's been really wonderful. I want to thank you, and I want to thank
You're welcome.
Everyone who's tuning in. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, now you're going to get some tunes.
Yeah, so now stay tuned because Kate and Jerry are going to play some old time music as their band Shingle the Roof. So thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, I worked in the cotton mill all my life. All I know is more than work. It's hard. The story of the cotton mill girls. Yes, that pretty much says it all.
The next one is the orphan train, which needs a minute of an explanation. This is from back in the 1830s and 40s. A bunch of preachers and important people from the cities got worried about all the truants who were running around raising heck, and so they decided to form a group, and they would gather these kids up and they'd send them on the orphan train out west, where hopefully they would get adopted by farmers and maybe in some cases taken into families. Okay. Once had a darling mother, but I don't recall her name. Had a baby brother who I'll never see again. For the children's home is sending us out on the orphan train, looking for someone who can take us in. We have rode the orphan train, take us in. I need a name, I need a home, take us in. How won't you be our kin? I'm looking for someone to take us in.
I've stolen from the poorhouse, I have roamed the city streets. I've swat in the bars and pub rooms for a little night to eat. In my daddy's old green jacket and these rags upon my feet, I'd like to find someone to tend me.
Take us in. We have roamed the orphan train. Take us in. I need a name. I need a home. Take us in. And won't you be our kin? We're looking for someone. Take us in. Now the children's home, they gathered us, me and all the rest. They taught us to sit quietly until the food was blessed. They sent us on that orphan train, sent us way out west, looking for someone to take us in. Take us in. We have rode the orphan train. Take us in. I need a name. I need a home. Take us in. And won't you be our kin? I'm looking for someone to take us in.
Well, the farmers and their families, they came from miles around. They put us on the platforms of the station in your town. And one by one we parted like something lost and found. One by one we all were taken.
Take us in. We have rode the orphan train. Take us in. I need a name. I need a home. Take us in. And won't you be our kin? I'm looking for someone. Take us in. There's many a fine doctors or teachers in your school. Many a fine preacher who improved the whole world. You started out as orphans in the freezing rain. Your lives began upon your own. Take us in. We have road written by
Very nice.
Bruce Phillips, known as Utah. No copyright.
Yep, Utah Phillips.
Yep, just put it out there.
So this is not one of those old-timey songs, but it's an old-timey song.
Well,
'cause it
it's
sounds like
about
an
old
old-timey
times.
song. Down in Caroline, do you want to tell the people about this song?
Well, Charlie Monroe wrote it, performed it. He's Bill's brother. And in the early days was every bit as popular as Bill and his band. And of course they were together as the Monroe brothers for years. And were, I guess, there were a lot of duets. I think they were the hottest duet around. Maybe not the best, but the hottest. So this is out of him. Ready?
Sure.
In the shadow of the pine, there's a gal I'm working on. Life's worth living any time. Down in Caroline, it don't matter where I roam, she'll be waiting where I go. And I'll find a gal of mine down in Caroline. Hair of gold and eyes so blue, and a heart you know so true. Lord, you know that she loves you. Down in Caroline, it's no matter where I roam, she'll be waiting where I know. And I'll find a gal of mine down in Caroline. Arms that held me sweet and tight, lips that kissed me goodnight. And I know our love is right. Down in Caroline, it's no matter where I roam, she'll be waiting there I know. And I'll find a gal of mine down in Caroline. She is waiting there for me, prettiest thing you've ever seen. I'll go down on bended knee, down in Caroline. It's no matter where I roam, she'll be waiting where I go. And I'll find a gal of mine down in Caroline. And I'll find a gal of mine down in Caroline.
Down in Caroline.
We're going to sing Ellen Smith, and this is a song about a murder, as many of these old-time songs are. But this one happens to be true, and I was supposed to look up on the internet the place and the date, but I think it was Virginia, and it was early 20th, late 19th century. And she was accidentally killed by her boyfriend, and the two families apparently to this day are not speaking to each other. And the song continues to be sung. This is a ballad. It goes on and on and on and gives the whole gory mess.
Families were fighting over that, correct?
Yeah,
The families, yeah. Like the McCoys and the whatchamacallit.
Hatfields.
Hatfields.
Okay.
One. Come on, you good people, a story to hear. What happened to me in June last year? Poor Alice Smith, oh, what she found. Shot through the heart, mighty cold on the ground. Poor little Ellen, sweet as a rose, out of heaven, nobody knows. Cold on the ground, with her arms across her breast, the sheriff and the bloodhounds, they gave me no rest. They picked up their rifles, they hunted me down, they found me all around your town. Poor little Ellen, sweet as a rose, now I'm Ellen, nobody knows. Picked out their rifles, they hunted me down. They found me living all around your town. On Monday I was arrested, Tuesday I was tried. My laws are country bound to run. Oh, little Ellen, sweet as a rose, now I love Ellen, nobody knows. Again. I've been in this prison for 20 long years. Each night I see Ellen through my bitter tears. If I could go home and stay when I do, sweet flowers around Ellen's backyard I will sow. Sweet flowers I will sow, sweet flowers I will sow, sweet flowers around Ellen's backyard I will sow. The jailer just told me tomorrow I'll be free to go to the break, climb the willow tree. My time in this prison, it's ending at last. I'll never be free from the sentence of the past. Poor little Ellen, sweet as a rose, I love Ellen, nobody knows. Nobody knows, nobody knows, I love Ellen, nobody knows.
This is also kind of a memorial song. One of our good friends passed away, and before she did, she'd always ask me wherever we happened to be, where we would be singing songs, for me to sing this song. So send it out to her.
We're getting to that age, Jer.
Oh, shit. You're way behind. No, this is,
It's called Little Mountain Church House.
and it's sent out to the memory of Linda Schrade. I'm thinking tonight of that little
It was there in that little mountain church house. I first heard the words that makes my heart go Looking back now, that little mountain church house has become my life's cornerstone. It was there in that little mountain church house I first heard the words to make my life Little mountain church house.
Thank you. This is a song written by Gillian Welsh. It's a new song, brand new song, maybe 10 years, 15 years old, which makes it new. Anyway, it's called Winter's Come and Gone. Oh, little red bird on my windowsill, I'm so lonesome I chase that morning chill. Oh, little red bird, open your mouth and say, I'm so lonesome, just walk away. So long have I been out in the rain and snow, winter's come and gone, a little bird told me so. Oh, little bluebird, pearly feathered breast, my cold nickels is all that I've got left. Oh, little bluebird, what am I gonna do? My cold nickels will never see me through. So long I've been out in the rain and snow, winter's come and gone, a little bird told me so.
You did, Miss Sally. Now, we're not going to do it all over for Sally. Sally's going to have to be out there all by her lonesome.
Okay, Sally's going to have to be there very lonesome. Just sing that first so they know how it goes, how I'm supposed to do it.
There goes Sally's snicker in the grand. There goes Sally's snicker in the grand.
Groundhog gravy all over her chin.
Groundhog.
There we go.
All right.
This song is called Angeline and was later transmogrified into a fiddle tune called Angelina Baker. But the original song, which is what I'm going to sing, was written by Stephen Foster. And I didn't look up the date, but it's in the Stephen Foster songbook. So... song we're going to do is called Bark of Life. It's a Carter family song, and we just recently, last week, lost a monumental member of the folk community, Phil Zimmerman, mandolin player, play anything else with strings in it, but he was known for his
Like you,
mandolin.
he can play everything.
What's that?
Like you all out there, he can play everything.
Right,
He could
right.
play everything.
So Phil sang this at the commemoration for our missing band member, Tim
Yeah,
Woodbridge,
yeah.
our fiddler, about 3 years ago, and we had a memorial service for Tim, and Phil sang this for Tim, and so we're appropriately
I'll sing it for
singing
him.
this for Phil. And we're not going to put in the F chord right at the beginning.
The four does not belong in the first half of the first or of the verses.
Right, right,
Okay, all right.
okay. My bark of life is when the sea of time. When first I saw your smiling face, was in its prime. I'll never forget wherever I go, wherever you may be. If ever I have had a friend, you've been that friend to me. Misfortune nursed me as a child and raised me tender too. I would have had a broken heart had it not been for you. Oh, I'll never forget wherever I roam, wherever you may be. If ever I have had a friend, you've been that friend to me. I now look back across the past, across life's troubled sea, and smile to think through all I've seen. That friend to me. I'll never forget wherever I roam, wherever you may be. If ever I have had a friend, you've been that friend to me. If ever I have had a friend, you've been that friend to me. I still put in the four. Thanks, Phil.
Okay, next, Sunny Side of Life, I think.
Sure.
Is that it for?
Carter family song, and this amazingly to me, maybe not amazing, was recorded on Miss Loretta Lynn's latest CD. So even though she's accompanied by a full country western band, she's singing a Carter family song on there.
There's a dark and sunny side of life. There's a bright and a sunny side too. Though we meet with the darkness and twilight,
The new Classic Banjo project was instituted to develop and record a modern classical banjo repertoire to include 5, 6, 7-string, and other hybrid banjos. Compositions for the 2019-20 season were commissioned for the Banjar, a 7-string classical banjo which I designed. In 2021, I finished a new solo piece and video, Banjar Lam Plern, for the Banjar, and composed the first 5 of 30 short studies, or aperçus, for the 5-string banjo. More details on composers, pieces, and the project can be found at www.michaelnixmusic.com. Barton Cove is a stretch of the Connecticut River in western Massachusetts, rich in natural and human history. The Battle of Turner's Falls, otherwise known as the Battle of Great Falls, or the Piskiemskit Massacre or Wissatinawag Massacre, was fought on May 19, 1676, during King Philip's War, in present-day Gill, Massachusetts, near Barton Cove on the Connecticut River. I combine the idea of classical guitar arpeggios with banjo textures for this evocative work. In guitar tuning, the A section uses the 7th string as a drone and provides additional option for melody. The B section uses strumming textures from the older stroke banjo style. Coromantee is based on music of a gathering or festival of the enslaved in Jamaica in 1688, transcribed by a Mr. Baptiste for the British explorer Hans Sloane and published in the 1707 volume A Voyage to the Islands of Madeira, Barbados, Nevis, St. Christopher, and Jamaica. The word Coromantee refers to the Akan people from what we now call Ghana. The transcription was originally in 3 sections. I've used themes from each of the sections and added my own material to make it parse well for modern ears. This version was recorded at the Hawks and Reed Arts Center in one take for both audio and video. Overcome by Jim Dalton is in two movements. The first, surrounding hate. The second, forcing it to surrender. The year 2019 marked the 100th anniversary of the birth of singer and activist Pete Seeger. Written on the head of Seeger's banjo was the phrase, "This machine surrounds hate and forces it to surrender." Jim Dalton writes, "Recent events have made this statement and the intent that it embodied even more meaningful to me. Michael Nix's offer of a commission to write a concert piece for banjo gave me an opportunity to commemorate this significant presence from my formative years as a musician and person of conscience. Though I use some of the tunes connected with Seeger as source material, they are usually buried in the texture and counterpoint and not meant to be overt. The two movements use musical metaphors to express the ideas embodied in the movement titles. Paired with a form of the ancient technique of soggetto cavato, these give shape to the composition, though they are likely not obvious to the listener." Banjar Lam Plern. While on tour in Thailand, I had the occasion to travel the northeastern provinces to the Isan region abutting the Mekong River near Laos. I fell in love with the raucous folk music known as morlam played there. Typical instrumentations includes the keen, a free reed mouth organ with 2 rows of bamboo pipes, and the fin, a 3-string guitar with an elaborate carved head dragon headstock. Modern players electrify their instruments and include drums and electric bass. Lam Plern is a mode or style of morlam music characterized by virtuosic playing. The style often consists of 3 distinct sections. The first, a virtuosic burst of solo cane music marked by rhythms that mimic quick breaths. 2, a slow, free ad-lib section in wandering meters and tempos. And 3, a highly rhythmic section in a duple meter wherein the fin player develops traditional themes. Canningale's Mystery Serenade was composed for me by Thomas Schuttenhelm. Julian Hawthorne was an American writer and journalist and the son of novelist Nathaniel Hawthorne. In his story, Can's Mystery of 1883, the protagonist, Canningale, describes his encounter with a 200-year-old woman, Ethelind, who was awakened from her centuries of sleep by a song he played on his banjo. Shortly after Canningale's serenade to Ethelind, he discovered that the banjo appeared to age 200 years. This song serenade is a reimagining of the mystery, music, and mutations that were enacted upon Canningale's strange banjo. Aperçu from the French means a survey or sketch as in an outline or an immediate impression, especially an insight. I write these aperçus as a way of introducing my ideas for a new classic banjo style to the five-string community. While most of my work has been for the extended range of my self-designed seven-string banjo, I feel it's important to continue the tradition of the nylon five-string fingerstyle classic banjo and to bring the art form of this rich style of playing from the 19th century into the 21st century. The final piece on my program is Spanish Fandango. Spanish Fandango, neither Spanish nor Fandango, was a favorite theme for composing banjo or guitar variations. After researching and playing through many of these pieces from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, I decided to write my own variation set to exploit the range and textures of the banjo. I want to thank you all for attending the new American Banjo Festival. I hope to see you here in the future. Michael Nix here. Thank you for attending this evening's portion of the New American Banjo Festival. Come back tomorrow. You can reach the stream at couchmusic.live, and it will be streamed on the New American Banjo Festival Facebook page. Tomorrow, we'll be watching the film Line Fork, a film featuring Kentucky banjo legend Lee Sexton, a Smithsonian Folkways film. Then we'll have a Zoom question and answer with Vic Rawlings. You don't need to go to Zoom. It will be right in the live stream. So it will be Vic Rawlings, myself, and Ken Perlman talking about the film. Following that, classic fingerstyle banjo virtuoso from Detroit, Aaron Jonah Lewis. You don't want to miss that. And rounding out the program will be Ken Perlman, internationally known melodic clawhammer banjo stylist. Thank you all again for your generous support. We really appreciate your support of banjo. See you tomorrow.